For the next program, we have presentation by Professor Gaurav Raheja. Uh, Professor Gaurav is a well-known accessibility and universal design consultant from India and professor for architecture at IIT Rourkee. He is also a co-author of Universal Design India Principles and worked on some of the prestigious projects on Accessible India campaign. Besides his numerous and wide range of experiences and being international fellow, researcher and a scholar, he is highly interested in design thinking, social inclusion, universal design, children and aging futures, urban sustainability, human-centric design, contemporary world architecture, design pedagogies, social and design research methods, visual communication, photo essay, and storytelling. Today, he will be presenting us on universal design, the inclusive way forward.
Kusu Sangpola. Hello, my dear friends in Bhutan and others who are attending this National Disability Seminar on Transformative Solutions for Inclusive Development in Bhutan. Greetings from India and IIT Rourkee. I am here with you today talking about a subject which concerns the whole dimension of inclusion, being titled as Universal Design, the Inclusive Way Forward. In order to understand the various dimensions of inclusivity, I shall take you through the four broad dimensions of this presentation. The first one talks about understanding inclusivity from various perspectives. The second one is about understanding universal design as an approach. In the third section, we focus on various paradigms and analogies which also contextualize to Bhutan. And fourth, we will have a broad overview of what is the way forward for Bhutan towards an inclusive development agenda. To begin the conversation, let us have a look at this beautiful image. The landscapes of Bhutan, which do not distinguish between the mountains, the valleys, the skies, and the structures in between. Even a blade of grass gets included the moment you say the landscapes of Bhutan. Even the tall and the mighty mountains get included when you say the landscapes of Bhutan. Everything becomes inclusive when you address it in an inclusive way. So whenever we address a nation by its name, I presume that every individual, all people remain included as part of it. Now that analogy applies to the whole context of what we are trying to understand here. Many a times people with disability have been excluded from mainstream conversations. They remain sometimes offloaded from the sectors of education, from employment, and such that even access to daily life becomes a challenge for them. However, it's important for us to learn that humans can be classified in a very intersectional way. Every human has a certain dimension of age, has a certain background to the faith that he or she believes in, has a gender to himself or herself, and definitely has diverse levels of ability in different contexts, which some of them could be functional limitations, and also represents various cultures, economic status, and nationalities. But they're all part of one human. The point is, can these become a reason for differentiating, for not providing access, and as a consequence for excluding them from the mainstream? I believe the 21st century world is a lot about coming together. It cannot continue to differentiate, discriminate, and identify people with disabilities as separate. They must become part of one holistic diversity, which is human. We believe the land of Bhutan would definitely be progressive enough to take this perspective and will understand that diversity is the mix and inclusion is making the mix work as we understand this one. To further understand, isn't it very paradoxical that age, gender, human abilities or disabilities, and their economic status in many such dimensions, the humans have no choice of their own because they do not happen by your and my wish, but they happen. And as a consequence, they should not be penalized by virtue of keeping them excluded. And this is something which we have to understand when we are planning and developing the future environments of a nation. Because for everything else, choice is a possibility. And I believe that the choice of creating social environments, built environments, technology environments, legal environments, and policy environments are all within the landscapes of Bhutan, of a nation. And how do we address all of them such that every human is endowed with the choice of working with independence and performing the acts of daily life to the best of their abilities? And just as the land of Thimphu, just as many other valleys of Bhutan, just see how beautifully remain included within the mountains as valleys. Isn't that like a crucible? Isn't that like that humans are nestled in the beautiful nature with the sky covering them and including everyone, big, small, rich, poor, together? And with that inclusivity, I hope inclusivity can become another feather for the land of happiness as a way forward to take things in a very holistic way and a futuristic way ahead. The second dimension of this presentation is about understanding universal design as an approach. What does this mean? Universal design primarily is a value, is a process, is an approach. It's a way of thinking. And I believe a nation like Bhutan, which believes in so much of peace, so much of happiness, it shouldn't be a surprise that it's a universal value and a universal sensitivity which talks about design of every product and environment to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible, which basically implies that anything that we're designing should adapt to as far as possible a diverse range of people without the need for specialized designs. Now, if this is a possibility, I believe inclusivity would be a reality. However, universal design theory, which was earlier coined by architect Ronald Mays, has also further gone transformations. As a new definition, now universal design is very well recognized as a process of creating products, and I would add to this word creating products would be creating environments that are accessible to people with a wide range of abilities, disabilities, and other characteristics. I hope we all are able to understand this forward and contextualize this further in the context of Bhutan. The 7 principles of universal design broadly reflect equity, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive use, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, and size and shape for the people who are distinct in their body sizes and are able to be accommodated in a wide range of contexts. Now, if all these principles are actually endowed in any process, in any system, we believe there is no reason why anybody would be left out. Likewise, if you understand this in contextualizing for Bhutan, it would be important to understand what is equity for Bhutan, what is simple and intuitive in Bhutan, what is flexible in Bhutan, and how do we tolerate human errors for not making certain provisions, but they shouldn't cause any harm to any individual and more so to people with disabilities. All this we have to contextualize in the context of education, access to basic life, access to mobility, access to employment, and many other dimensions in which everyday tasks of social participation remain included. The question is, how does Bhutan do that? Including access to religion, access to pilgrimage, access to tourism as part of the whole landscape. So, keeping this in perspective, we would say using these universal design principles, we can actually check our own policies, we can check our own adaptations in design, we can check our own systems and technologies that are in place. And let's ask this question, is X meaning that environment, that individual, that system, inclusive, or does it include what? Included in education, mobility, participation to everyday living, employment, tourism, and many other dimensions. This is just for a small illustration that we have put these 4 dimensions here. Likewise, you have to ask this question, is X equitable? Is X flexible? Is X tolerant to error? And is our system safe enough for everyone to participate? Taking this to the 3rd section now, which is paradigms, the frameworks of understanding, the analogies of the context that we're talking about. So some basic information from the web provides us this information that 2.1% of the population of Bhutan is categorized as disabled. UNICEF estimates suggest up to 20% of disability prevalence in the Bhutanese youth. The question is either of these percentages or something that remains a fact. If that was true, there would be a significant number of Bhutanese with some or the other form of disability, and which is quite a concern. And the important concern that arises out of this is that a majority of them perhaps remain in rural settings, and consequently making them isolated and inactive, something that India also faces as a consequence of high disability prevalence in the rural sectors. And if that be so, persons with disabilities remain to be considered as a burden in the family because they cannot be provided any work or could not earn anything, consequence to inaccessibility to most environments around them. Now, when Bhutan looks at its own future, I believe this would remain a very pivotal task to ensure that access becomes a key ingredient for the steps to inclusion as we make our infrastructure, as we build our systems. But for that to happen, we have to understand how the state provides assistance or support. The level 1 talks about is assistance in the form of understanding. Only when our policymakers, only when our systems, the common public, the civic citizens understand that having assistance in the form of humans or technologies would be a great idea to bridge the gap between environmental access and human adaptability. I believe this would be the first level at which we have to make a lot of awareness possible at the ground. Level 2 talks about the development of policy frameworks. Do we have the right policies in place? Are we still developing them? Do we need to review them at some stage? Can we provide those assistances through the policies and their implementation on the ground? The level 2. Level 3, the translation of all this in the form of infrastructure, be it built, be it physical, be it non-physical, but it's pretty critical for us to understand that. 4th level talks about technology. It's because of the same technology today I'm able to interface with you sitting in Bhutan and I'm sitting in IIT Rourkee in India, that this inclusive model of exchange is possible. Likewise, technology can play a big role in transforming our educational services, our employment services, our tourism services, because a lot of information access happens through that. While in many other sectors of infrastructure also, technology is unavoidable in today's world. And last of all, which I would call it as level 5, the assistance models have to be built in terms of services. So have we trained our staff? Have we trained our manpowers? Have we trained our systems well enough that the last delivery of services happens with great access and provides the required assistance in order to be called as inclusive? It's important to also realize that humans do not stay fixed at one body size at one level always. It's a bell-shaped curve which defines the human life. And this bell-shaped curve also ensures that how an average user is at one phase of one's life, but essentially moves on to become a non-average user as you shift your lifespans. And within this are also included people like children, like adults, like elderly, people getting on a wheelchair, women going through a family way, people getting sensory impairment or cognitive impairments, etc., either as part of lifespan or as events of life which can suddenly change their status from being an average to a non-average user. The challenge for a nation always is how do you accommodate the non-average users as part of your average access to infrastructure. And therefore, in order to understand this, we call this a fitness model. On one side is the P, which is the person, and the other side is the E, which is the environment. So let's say Bhutan is an environment, and the P are the people, the citizens of it. Now, any P, which means a person who may have a diverse psychosocial or physiological abilities, which doesn't form part of the average user group, how does he or she fit into the environment? Now, both possibilities exist. On one side, you can push the P towards greater adaptation, which means the person is given rehabilitation, the person is given support by assistive technology. The other is the environment becomes more accommodative. So I would say, therefore, there is a huge dynamic modeling of this understanding of diverse kinds of needs. People with vision impairments, people with hearing impairments would require a different kind of intervention as compared to somebody with a mobility impairment, likewise with a learning disability. So everybody would require a different range of fit, and believe me, it's not that difficult either, but it starts with basic awareness. So if you see it from the lens of assistive technology, it can bring a connect between the person and the environment using the role of technologies. So this is what we call as PAT, which is the personalized assistive technology. It's important to understand that any technology also needs to understand the whole cycle. It's not that you develop a technology and make a provision for it, but we also have to see the whole holistic impact of it, including how far will it be made more sustainable such that people can rely on indigenous stuff for development as well. And here I think we should welcome even traditional crafts of that particular region, such that if they are more adaptive, they would perhaps go a long way. But these would also be subjects of research, subjects of constant innovation. And if you see from the sectors of environment, you see there's an information environment, there's a mobility environment, there's a built environment, and then there are services and educational environments within which all this also technology has to go through. So if you see on one side we have diverse dimensions of human selves, which are various disabilities. On the other side are the various dimensions of the environment, and together the assistive technology can create a beautiful network and shifts of the way we look at disability by making it all accessible. Take it further, look at the example how technology through hearing aids can transform lives, how through mobility aids it can provide various kinds of functions which are otherwise challenging for people with mobility impairments, ranging from a standing wheelchair to a motorized one. Likewise, a clip-on wheelchair which transforms into a tricycle as one of the developments of a startup at IIT Metro, leading to examples of prosthetics with alternative materials and making them smart and efficient as well. Another example being a smart cane which can detect obstructions above the head height, making mobility and navigation safer for people with vision impairment. Now, all these are just examples. I'm sure there are many more, including voice recognition and taking voice commands, consequentially becoming inclusive in a way by these devices that even all of us have started using such products. Because what is accessible sometimes for people with disabilities is a matter of great convenience for many others. So, inclusivity is not truly about making something special, but it is something about doing such that everyone can derive benefits out of. Likewise, I believe Bhutan is a hilly state, and if there are possibilities using technologies of putting travelators at great sloping heights, enables the use of technology to cover heights and move in slopes. This is an example from the context of Germany. Likewise, platform heights, I'm not sure if it's relevant for Bhutan, but it's to explain that bringing the platform level and the train chassis level at one level has made the Indian mass rapid transport systems like metros amazingly accessible and usable. Likewise, the use of tactile as sensory buttons in the lifts and elevators could also be another dimension of making things more inclusive in public spaces. The important question will always remain is for whom? And here we all know what we are talking right now around the World Disability Day is about people with disabilities. And perhaps some of us may also be part of the same, knowing that we may have failing and falling conditions of functional limitation. So if you look at assistive technologies, essentially their role is to address the critical needs. They need to look at the context for which they need to be for which they need to be developed, and definitely they have to be creative enough when talking about the cultural dimension of it. As a way forward, finally, for an inclusive Bhutan, I believe I have to remind everyone here that Bhutan, the land of happiness, and happiness cannot be exclusive. Let happiness be inclusive, perhaps for people with disabilities as well. And for that, these three dimensions remain critical. We need to invest in accessibility as an attribute, as a value, with the approach of universal design as a process, such that inclusion as a dream, as a goal becomes possible. And we start looking at this push of assistive technology as one of those dimensions, and such that every person with disability gets included into the same environment as they should have. This also addresses the sustainable development goals, which we all see them as a wheel. As a wheel because if you even plug out one such goal out of it, the whole wheel fails. Because to keep everyone together is the challenge for the entire globe. And I believe Bhutan, as a beaming light of the land of happiness, can show that way by bringing more inclusivity through these SDGs, which are also quite intersected and interconnected to develop. This is a paradoxical slide of two teeth of my own father who fell down on a barrier in the infrastructure. And that's when I realized that inaccessibility also has a huge cost. So if you create more barriers, well, we continue to pay more cost. But if you want to remove accessibility, inaccessibility, I think we need to invest in accessibility. Now, both things have a dimension because inaccessibility leads to a price that is paid by human pain, by human discomfort, and many a times human exclusion. The question is, and the question before the nation is, are we ready to pay the cost and not the price of inaccessibility? So let's build more access, more inclusion, and take this choice as the only way forward using technology, using information and infrastructure with innovation for the people that matter to us through their participation. From the Laboratory of Inclusive Design, which I founded at the IIT Rourkee, we are happy to move in a dimension which we call it from inclusion to independence. And a couple of works that we've been doing for the Indian government include the development of the harmonized guidelines and standards for universal accessibility, which is freely available on the web. Likewise, we've been part of the team who developed the accessibility guidelines for higher education in the institutions and universities for the UGC. Further, we are currently working on accessible tourism guidelines for India as well. I believe Bhutan may require some of these supports, but may also need a lot of contextualization, which perhaps would be a matter to do a little research, and surely we will be happy to provide that support if needed. And the important question that we have to keep asking is everyone included? And develop a mission statement. How can we therefore envision an inclusive Bhutan? By engaging people and empowering them with diverse possibilities that embrace them to enable. And all this is grounded by the idea called empathy. So friends, towards the concluding part, let's have the guiding intent clarified. The Bhutan's inclusive perspectives to Bhutan's engagement for equitable policies could be a mission statement for us and transforming the BIP to BEEP finally. And let inclusive Bhutan be a happier Bhutan. And that's what we wish from this part of the world. And say in the Songkha language, Ka Din Che La. Thank you so much for a very patient listening, and I wish you a very happy time at the National Disability Seminar. Thank you once again. Bye-bye.